He seems to me equal to the gods, that man who opposite you sits and listens close to your sweet speaking and lovely laughing. Oh, it puts the heart in my chest on wings, for when I look at you a moment, then no speaking is left.
Let's get scientific and talk about love. Like everything else in nature, love unfolds in two dimensions, time and space, and two questions spring accordingly. First, what do lovers want from time? Where many would say to make it stop, to freeze the moment just before the final embrace, when the eyes meet, irises fanning like peacocks at the sound of a mating call. But as impossible as it actually is, if that were to happen, wouldn't it also stop the delicate growth that lovers go through during their affair? Wouldn't their frozen passion leave the two lovers exactly as it found them? Being scientific, we'll do what scientists do when confronted with a difficult question. Ignore it and move on, and ask instead, what do lovers want from space? Well, here almost everyone would agree that what lovers truly want is to make the space between them disappear, collapse the distance, make it implode so that they can be finally joined as one. But it's during that very moment when lovers consume their ultimate desire that love, Eros, flies away. And so, the poet who wants to keep erotic desire in her focus also needs to keep her distance from the object of her desire. In Sappho, a woman of such talent that even Aristotle had to grant her dues albeit her gender, knew very well that passion lives not in the lover's embrace, but in the space between them. Sappho came from the island of Lesbos, and if this word comes to your mind with a certain homoerotic tone, it's because she was one of the first to sing of love as it conquers a woman's heart for another woman.
He seems to me equal to the gods, that man who opposite you sits and listens close to your sweet speaking.
This poem, Sappho's Fragment 31, is one of her most complete. Sadly, of course, as most others contain but a few words. But Fragment 31 is also her most riddling. We assume that both a man and a woman are present, and that the poem is addressed to her rather than him. But what is it really about? An obvious answer could be jealousy, as what Sappho seems to be drawing is a love triangle. But triangles have all sorts of hidden properties, and eventually the Greeks would discover their secrets. The art of triangulating, or opening up the space between 3 points, is used today exactly as it was invented by the Greek geometers of antiquity. Every time that going from A to B is impossible, they found another solution, adding C and measuring the distance it created. And Sappho might be doing something similar when introducing the man she initially addresses her poem. Because for the lyric poets of Greece, distance was a necessary condition for the kind of love they immortalized, the kind of love they called Eros. And unlike Amour, the perfect love preached by the French troubadours during the Middle Ages, the Greeks understood Eros as an invader, an enemy. He was the honey that burned Meleager's wound, the lysimelis or limb loosener that paralyzed Archilochus as his eyes fell upon a youth in his first bloom, who turned Sappho green from fear, leaving her dichamita noemata, her mind split in two. The shaking of limbs, the cold sweat, green as the color of fear. This was Homer's language of war. Ancient Greece was a fighting culture through and through, where the reality of war became so natural it informed the common vocabulary used during peacetime. So the lyric poets who spoke of Eros used Homeric language like they were walking into battle, perhaps even their death, betraying exactly how they understood this all-conquering passion. These were the Greeks of ancient times, of course, and modern readers will probably find this exaggerated. More than that, they will probably find it unnecessary, as the only rational course of action today is to simply close the distance that is left intentionally open by the lyric poets of old. For us, and surprisingly the younger among us, talk about romantic love is in such decline that soon there will be no connection left between what students read in poetry class and their somewhat deprived life experiences. Raised in a materialist culture addicted to scientific theories on human behavior, young students everywhere are trained to understand love as they are trained to understand everything else, as a thin cover over something more basic and more real: sex. I say trained because educated would be an overstatement, as a true education would not only include the understanding of love in its proper terms, but builds upon such understanding, where love becomes the vector of a child's growth directed by the educator towards the noble and the good, exactly as we read in Plato. But in contrast to Plato's academy, the modern high school forces children into a premature adulthood through an increasingly early exposure to sex, which is perhaps why they so often appear like adults at 16, the world holding no mystery. And whatever Darwin's theory of evolution could not break, Freud's theories of sexual repression finished off, convincing the world to accept an understanding of love that is entirely sexual and strangely unerotic. But for the Greeks, love, erotic love, is not to be apprehended by the rational mind because it's nothing but a contradiction, the wanting for something that once achieved will cease to be. So they stayed in the wanting, knowing all too well that desire is bitter-sweet, and it will forever and always be about what is far away. So they invented a word to express it: eros. So, let's hear the poem once again.
He seems to me equal to the gods, that man who opposite you sits and listens close to your sweet speaking and lovely laughing. Oh, it puts the heart in my chest on wings, for when I look at you a moment, then no speaking is left in me. No. Tongue breaks, and thin fire is racing under the skin, and in eyes no sight, and drumming fills ears, and cold sweat holds me, and shaking grips me all. Greener than grass I am, and dead. Or almost, I seem to me.
Notice how the poem opens on a theater set where actors with no name come in and out of action. First, that man appears, equal to the gods, he seems. But then, the poem shifts to her and her sweet speaking. But then, something else happens. She leaves the scene as quickly as she came, and all that's left on stage is a body, that of Sappho herself. All green, the color of frightened warriors before battle, and just like them, dead, or almost. This, then, is a poem about the poet who, unlike so many star-crossed lovers who think the root of their emotions to lie in the other, Sappho knows that desire lies in neither participants, but in the space between them. So, just like the Greek geometers, Sappho finds another solution. She triangulates.